for joining us today for educational webinar, Assistive Technology for Farm Workers and Their Employers. Today we are joined by Elizabeth Gandera Castillo. Like I said, this is educational webinar, Assistive Technology for Farm Workers and Their Employers with Elizabeth Gandera Castillo, and she'll also be joined by Ned Stoller. We all work for AgriBility in some capacity. And so I will just give you a little information about that. So AgriBility is a program funded by the National Institute of Food and Agriculture through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And our goal is to provide services to individuals with disabilities, chronic health conditions, and functional limitations in agriculture. So a few little instructions for today. If you're not speaking, just mute your microphones to reduce any background noise for everyone. If you have any questions, there is a chat icon when you pull up Teams for where you're viewing the webinar. So you can put any questions you have in there. We will try to address questions as we go through the presentation, but we will also have time for questions at the end of the presentation as well. There's also an option to see closed captioning live. So if you click on the meeting options at the top of your screen, there's an option to turn on the live caption. So if you need closed captioning, that is available. The webinar will also be recorded that you can view later on our YouTube channel, which is TX AgriBility, and then we can also send that out along with any presentation slides or other materials to those who have registered and attended. This is our contact information, and we will also share this at the end of the presentation if you're interested. But with that, I will turn it over to Ellie.
Hey guys, I want to thank Mackenzie for helping me out today, and of course Mr. Stoller as well, who's part of National AgriBility, and he's, I believe, in Michigan, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and so he's an assistive technology professional there, and Mackenzie also has a lot of knowledge on that as well. So I'm going to turn off my camera so I can get better reception over here on my end. So as Ms. Mackenzie said, today's presentation is on assistive technology for farm workers and their employers. And the next couple of slides, I'm going to kind of pass them up because Mackenzie kind of did a little presentation on a little overview. I'm just going to talk about what Texas agriculture is and our contract with Texas Workforce Commission Vocational Rehab. We are partners. Brief overview and some definitions and history about assistive migrant seasonal farm workers, and then the program staff. Why Texas AgriBility? And one of the two things that I'm going to really focus on this slide is secondary injury prevention, as well as farm workers that suffer from a high prevalence of work-related injuries. That is my main focus today. And a quick question, if you guys want to put something on the chat, either yes or no, how many of you know what is grown in the state of Texas? Here is a brief map, of Texas. And Texas is the second largest industry, Texas agriculture is the second largest industry in Texas. It brings in roughly about $100 billion a year. And 98% of Texas agriculture operations are run by individuals or families. So if you guys notice the state of Texas, Texas is big, and it is divided into 7 regions. And the first one is the Panhandle. Now they overlap, a lot of these overlap, but we have here dairy in the Panhandle, and West Texas is cotton. The north side of Texas is wheat. Central is cattle. South is deer. Rio Grande Valley is beets, and east is forestry. And I'll get into that in a little while. The next slide is just a brief definitions of what, and this goes into something else, but there's a bracero program that started back in 1942, I believe. I think it's on my next slide, but there's other definitions. But Bracero program started in 42, and Mexican workers await legal employment in the U.S. If you can see the pictures. So, and the next one is, if you can tell on the left slide, they used to use a short hoe. On the right side, it reverted to a long hoe, and to me, that is an issue with secondary injury and as well as more prevalence of injuries in the agriculture field. So going back to, or going forward, so equipment used in the following industry. So does anybody know if there's any kind of equipment that people would use in any of these 7 industries? The next slide is dairy right here. The Panhandle has dairy. And when it comes to equipment utilized by dairy farmers, it's not just about the milking. Additional farm equipment is required to harvest, store, and transport dairy, fodder, as well as produce energy for the dairy farming process. And often, large generators are needed to supply power to all of the milking equipment and environmental control. So if you see this, there's fodder trucks, fodder compacting presses, fodder block machines, mud pumps, balers, fodder mills, fodder chaff cutters, tractors, tanks, and harvesters, reapers, and milk cans. Everything, all of that is included. So just by looking at the pictures, you know, you might want to say, okay, what is a person in this industry that has some kind of functional limitation or disability? How can they continue to do their job? The next one has to do with cotton. Again, the same thing. You have cotton, you have a cotton gin on the bottom slide. The next one is planting, when a farmer is planting the cotton, and then there's a harvest. And look at the machinery that is used. This is extremely expensive machinery, and sometimes it is not easily accessible for a person with a disability. So other equipment that is used in the cotton industry is, on the left picture is, and I'm just going to use this, what I know, the disking, the knifing, after they've harvested the cotton, and it's put in it's called a bowl buggy, I think, or we used to call it a trailer. And this is other equipment that could be, and this is going to be an additional slide on assistive technology. I just wanted to let you guys know this is some equipment that may be used for a person that may need additional accommodations. So the other one is wheat. Again, like I said, all of this is going to overlap. Again, planting on a tractor, wheat, what it entails for a farmer or a farmer to plant. And all of it also has to do with the soil and how a person can or cannot go into the farm. And of course, the equipment also here is the harvesting, the driving as well. Like I said, some of this equipment overlaps. The other thing is central. Now we're going to central cattle. So what it entails for a person to work with cattle. And as we know, animals can be unpredictable as well. So in here, we have, of course, cattle. Then there's feed, the feed troughs, corral with a head gate. You have, sometimes you may end up needing a partner, putting on tags, ear tags, or even vaccinating the cattle using syringes, the antibiotics. If you have a person with arthritis, how is a person able to complete this task if they have a functional limitation? So the other thing is, the next one in the south is deer. So again, the same thing with deer. This is a very new industry, a cervid livestock industry, which encompasses elk, reindeer, axes, silka, all these other different kinds, is the fastest growing industry in rural America, and of course Texas is no exception. The other thing is, here's additional information, additional pictures on the deer. I've seen a couple here in Central Texas, families that have very small deer farms. Of course, in the Rio Grande Valley, we have individuals who plant beets. Again, the same thing with beets, farm equipment, what is used, tractors to plant, tractors, trucks, big equipment to harvest all of the equipment, all of the what's grown, the beets, and any additional vegetation or vegetables that are also grown. That also includes beets. Now, the next one is forestry. And this is what a lot of people may not realize, that here in Texas, because we're big, East Texas has a lot of woods. And one of the things that also can come from this is individuals who are working in this industry, log graders or scalers, and what their job entails is they either inspect logs for defects, or they measure the logs to determine the volume at which these individuals are doing. Again, going back to thinking about an individual who has a functional limitation or a chronic health condition or other kind of disability, how are they able to complete their job? Some of these individuals, they have to estimate the value of the logs or the pulpwood. The other thing that we need to remember is they often use handheld data collection devices, and into which they enter data about the trees. Workers often spend time outdoors, sometimes in poor weather, and often in isolated areas, and sometimes they may just be working by themselves. So again, being able to call somebody for assistance if there's a problem. So going to any of you know what kind of assistive technology is used in agriculture? Annette, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just wondering what part of the agriculture industry in Texas are the migrant farm workers most involved with? I wondered if there's a lot of citrus, or is that just a small place?
The South, sometimes where the beets are, I'm not sure there's a lot of citrus here, but I do know that in the Panhandle, where you have more of the cotton, there, and of course now with additional machinery, it used to be where more migrant seasonal farm workers were in that area. There are still certain areas south in the valley, Rio Grande Valley, also have a high number of migrant seasonal farm workers as well.
And what are they doing?
The majority of them are, and that's what I was going to get into, are they pick. I know that in the cotton fields, they do a lot of hoeing of weeds. And the only thing I can think of as far as in any equipment they use is a hoe. And that's why sometimes they use fertilizers on the ground to get rid of weeds, so there's not a lot of weeds. That's why a lot of producers or farmers or ranchers hire workers to take out the weeds with a hoe. And I don't know if you understand that. Now, there's other areas in other states that not only use a hoe, they also use machetes. And that's, yeah. So going into the technology in the workplace, for example, going back to looking at all of the workers that are working on tractors, there are some farm workers, migrant seasonal farm workers that are actually hired by the ag owners, producers that also drive these tractors, because that is their job as well. So there's on the tractor on the left, you have a tractor with a chair for a person that has some kind of mobility issue, as well as you see the one on the right, the person on the right. And both of these, if I remember correctly, are actually clients that have been served before, I think, by us. And we assisted in some of these individuals for them to, in conjunction with working with VR, they have purchased some of the equipment, and the clients continue doing their job and what they wanted to do and what they like to do. The other thing is,
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to make a comment on the man lifts that you show there. The one on the left is commercially available. It could be purchased and mounted on just about any kind of equipment there is. I've seen them on blueberry harvesters, logging equipment, combines, tractors, trucks. Very versatile. They
good to know that.
They cost about $12,000 a piece, and they're manufactured in Indiana. But the company that builds them also does the installation right at the farm where they're needed. And the lift on the right, on the red tractor there, is more of perhaps a farmer built model.
I think it was a modified RV lift. And so we've done a couple where they take RV lifts or other platform style lifts. We even had partnered with a local college and got some engineering students to design a lift for a farmer in the Panhandle to go on a cotton stripper. And so it was something that students could get involved with and offered kind of a lower cost alternative because it was a school project.
So the cotton strippers, quite a large piece of equipment, but they went ahead and built a platform lift for that also?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes the other varieties of lifts that can be built will cost less. But the commercial one is a very good option. It's very durable and will last a lot of years.
So that was my other question. What was the length of that they last? As long as the tractor will last, you think?
Yeah. I've seen some of them that are 25 years old still in use.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, so going on to this, the other thing is, if you guys look on the top left picture, this was actual equipment of what Mackenzie just said. This was an accommodation for this person who had mobility issues, not per se completely paralyzed, but with some mobility issues. So we have some real high-end, costly things, and there's some that are not as costly. The picture on the right was a lift that was also purchased by VR, and it was also installed. And this is a flatbed truck, and this person is actually paralyzed. And he can go in from his wheelchair to the lift, and then he can do whatever he needs to on his job. And these are more of the higher end equipment, and it is expensive equipment, and it does take time to get and approved and purchased, but it was done, and he very happy with that. Now the other thing is, one of the things that I was going to say on the bottom picture is, if you've ever done any kind of gardening on your own or whatever, and you got to sit there and put everything by hand, this is a self planner where you don't have to squat or bend over. This can help a person also with mobility issues, especially including the one on the right, to make the little holes so you can plant instead of going in there and bending over or squatting every so many feet with person with mobility issues. And continuing on, the person on the left, top left, this was also another client. The modification was also purchased and installed by VR, and this is a lift. He is paralyzed, and he is able to transfer himself from the wheelchair to the lift and go into the tractor and continue to do his daily job of working on his farm. I think this is a combine that Mackenzie was saying about the lift that was installed in this combine. As like Mr. Stoller said, the combine, or strippers as we call them, that's what we call them, are very expensive equipment. One of the other things that on the top right picture is there was a person who had mobility issues, knee problems, and he had to go up and down. I think this person was in the Panhandle trying to see what the level of was filled all the way up to the of grain that was filled up in this the bin here, and there was these little things installed every so many feet, and it could tell whether it was full or how full it was, so he wouldn't have to climb up the ladder and either risk falling or re-injuring his knees.
Are those indicators that can go in the grain bins like that can be installed from the outside of the bin? You don't even have to have a person on both sides, and that's really nice for putting those in.
And they're not, and that is not a very expensive equipment. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sorry, I think you're muted.
They're $110 to $120.
$20. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And then there's additional equipment on this is for when you were saying about the harvesting, like the migrant seasonal farm workers. I know that some people would harvest individually. Now this is new to me, actually, the one on the bottom right, where there's now additional accommodations where you have 2 or 3 people sitting on these they're called harvesters, and that also helps a person who needs to continue doing their job and is not able to walk or bend or squat every so many feet. There's also rolling carts, and these are usually most for personal use, like gardening or something, but I think that would help too. The other one is this person that has mobility issues or even paralyzed, the one on the top right, where they can still do their job, still harvest, and with proper equipment, they are able to do it. Now, the one on the bottom is some kind of like an assistive technology, ATV, all-terrain vehicle. I call it like a little Ranger or something. This lady has a prosthetic leg, so obviously she would have mobility issues to go around her farm to do her job on a daily basis. And additional equipment that's provided also for a person that has mobility issues in their hands, probably because of arthritis or any other illness, would be using a fork with arm support or arm support cuff, which could be an assistance to the person with limited mobility on their arms. And of course, the one on the bottom is a man who is in a walker. I believe he's getting into his tractor using a lift as well. And that was also, go ahead.
The picture on the bottom left of the workers, 4 workers sitting across on seats, they're actually planting vegetables there.
Oh, they're planting vegetables. I thought they were harvesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the similar concept can be used to, here there's a planter being pulled across the field with a tractor. And if there was a worker that couldn't walk, they would be able to continue doing this job without a problem, sitting on the transplanter seat and putting the vegetables into the planter one at a time.
Right.
In Michigan, with our asparagus harvest, they have a similar machine that's pulled along by a tractor, and the workers are seated and picking the asparagus by hand as they're moved along the field. So once again, that could be done by someone with a mobility impairment also. And that's normally not thought of as assistive technology because it's what everybody uses. But if there's a person with a disability and they have to have it, then it becomes assistive technology for them. So just want to point out those options for farm workers that might have a leg injury or balance impairment or something.
Right. Yes. Thank you for that, Mr. Stolder. And then the next one is, we're done with our pictures, but there's, I forwarded a link here. Anybody wants a copy of our PowerPoint with information on these links to about who we are, Intro to Agribility, or another program that we have here, the Battleground or Breaking Ground. we have additional information on that as well. And to continue with that, we have, this is our program staff, our director, Dr. Granwelsh, Cheryl Granwelsh, and our program manager for Battleground to Breaking Ground is Ms. Erin Kimbrough, and of course, Ms. Mackenzie Thomas, who is a program coordinator and supervisor for Texas Agribility, and myself as well. And these are our program partners. And that also includes some of the ones on the earlier slide about who our partners are too. And if you would like additional information about who we are, you can visit our website, or you can also go onto the website and go in and sign in to receive the newsletter for information on what we provide, as well as, and also, excuse me, this is also a toolbox. If you want to learn more about or see more about assistive technology, what's out there, National Agribility, this is the link to the National Agribility, and you can click on the toolbox, and it's got a lot of information on there. And that could also give you some more suggestions or ideas on some of you that might have clients that are working in the farming or ranching agriculture business. This is the information. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, and on the newsletter you can have see events, client stories, or assistive technology, or new equipment for farmers and ranchers, and additional partner agencies and organizations. And you can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This is our contact information. If you guys want to get a hold of us, this is our contact information. And are there any questions? Or any questions for Ms. Mackenzie, or any questions for Mr. Stoller as far as assistive technology?
I was just wondering if it's possible to share the screen and see the toolbox.
Yeah.
This is the National Agribility website, and there's a link right at the top for the toolbox assistive technology database. Click that, and then you can either view the toolbox by category, or you can do a general search. I usually do the general search box, but I'll show it to you both ways. And I also like to see 20 results. So for instance, if we wanted to see something about maybe some sort of an adaptive garden hoe, we could just type in here the word hoe and see all the different options. We've got different kinds of wheel hoes, 3, 4 of them. We have different types of grips for the tools to make holding the tools easier. This is, I'll just click on this one for fun. It's a homemade single arm gardening equipment. This was developed by Agribility in Idaho, the Center for Assistive Technology. And it's just a way that this hoe is actually attached onto someone's belt so that it pivots around that point. So if a person cannot use the other arm, they can just make the hoe pivot up and down, sort of using their waist, their trunk muscles, and their arm as a hoe. So that's an example of using the toolbox and using the search function. Otherwise, you could click on view by category. This would be more general shopping. Let's say you're having trouble handling your cattle, so we could go to livestock handling and housing, and that will give us various options here. General livestock, beef and dairy cattle. Let's go to the beef and dairy cattle one, since in my mind there's a lot of cattle in Texas. And let's say it's calving season and we need to take good care of our calves, and maybe we're struggling to bring calves in from the pasture or something. This is going to be more for the dairy industry, for an easy way to take care of calves, for easy for mobility, walking on a smooth surface, and the calves are all lined up, able to feed them in an easy way. So that with each product, when you click on it, it gives a description of how it works, how these calf pens can be customized to different sizes, and then it gives contacts for where you can get some assistive technology as needed. So I'm going to go back to the livestock handling and housing section, and we'll go to fencing and gates, see what we have there. So maybe pounding fence posts, building lots of fence on the range land in Texas to keep cattle in. And let's look at a air-powered post driver. So a commercially available air-powered post driver can drive in T-posts. It only weighs 26 pounds, and it does all the work for you, slamming the posts into the ground. So you can go to airpostdrivers.com or send an email or call. These are $1,550, so that's quite an investment. There's another company that makes an air-powered post driver for $600, and I'm just looking here to see if I see it on the list. Here it is, the ManSaver pneumatic post driver. So if someone has a shoulder impairment and raising and slamming the post driver down by hand is going to be difficult for them, the price on this one is $450 to $850, which is about a third the cost of the other one. But once again, we could click the link and go to Roar Manufacturing, and there it is. So a couple different ways there I showed you to use the toolbox, and a lot of really good resources on the National Agribility website for assistive technology, the primary one being the toolbox here. So does anyone have questions about using the toolbox?
I was going to say, Ned, that it's funny you pulled up that one on the toolbox, because my husband one time needed to, when he had some horses at one point, he said he was doing everything by hand all by himself, and he didn't have until a neighbor came over and says, do you need some help? I can go get he got a tractor and whatever he needed, and he said, I can help you. He says, you're going to be there all day for just one of them. He said he helped him do it in one day. He said that's something that you never think about until you decide that you want to do a project or something. And you're right about that's in general for anybody, not a person that has some kind of like a mobility issue. And the other thing that you brought up was the hoe for like one-armed, I think I had told you before, but when I was growing up in the Panhandle, my father had a coworker who had lost, the Hispanic migrant seasonal, we were all farm workers, but they were. And he lost an arm on the train when he was very young. And I'm dating myself here, but in the early 70s, I kind of wondered, without accommodations, how this man did his job. But he never complained, and nobody complained about his work. So I'm thinking that a lot of this assistive technology has evolved because he was a really good worker, a hard worker, and he did his job with one arm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the reality is that agriculture is a lot of work for anyone to do, and we might think that an air-powered post driver is something anybody needs. But if there's a person that's young and healthy like myself, I can pound a lot of posts in a day using that post driver. But if I would lose an arm, or if I would have a stroke or a hand injury or something, now I have to have some other way to do this job. And that's where things like that air-powered post driver would become assistive technology, not just a convenience for me, but something that's really necessary for me to continue my job. And so at AgriBility, if we can just bring assistive technology concepts and potential funding through different agencies or donors, however that would be, our goal is to increase the likelihood of success, that someone can continue their employment working on the farm as a migrant farm worker. And so there's a lot of options out there to think about, and so make sure to reach out to AgriBility for assistance with that.
If you could just click that link, it's just a short survey about today's presentation, but something I wanted to bring up, I know the presentation was geared towards not just farm workers, but their employers. And so if you, I don't know, the population that all of you guys are generally working with, but if there's someone you think might be interested, whether that's an employer of farm workers or the farm workers themselves, and you think, well, I don't know what their limitations might be. I don't know what kind of assistive technology they would need. You can, of course, go look and see what might be available, but a service that we provide through Texas AgriBility is we do assessments. And so we actually go on site and look at the task that the individual would need to complete, whether that's, in a field or with cattle or dealing with equipment. And try to make those recommendations, and also try to connect them with funding sources to fund some of that assistive technology. So you're definitely not on your own when it comes to sourcing assistive technology or seeing what's available. We also kind of look at different options we talked a little bit about, but we've partnered with local universities, school FFA chapters, if there's a piece of equipment that can be manufactured and it may not be readily available, or some modification might need to be made to make that work for a particular person. We try to make sure that that's doable, whether it's going to have that actually built by someone or something that can be purchased. So just keep in mind that not just for the farm worker, but if there's an employer that maybe they're seasonal farm workers and routinely they have people come through that have some sort of disability or physical impairment that they would need addressed, and how to do that, we can always consult with them and see what ways they might be able to help the people that are working for them as well.
I just want to say thank you all for being here today in your busy schedule. I think all of us are busy these days. But as Mackenzie said, if you guys have any questions or comments, please email us. Also, if you guys know of anybody that would like some assistance and we might be able to help, you may go ahead and forward our information to them as well. Thank you for your time.
I also included a link to or my email in the chat if you have any questions. I would also, if you're still on, like to ask in what capacity you guys work with migrant or seasonal farm workers. So if you could just, so we kind of know where you're coming from and at what capacity you work with the population. And we will also send out any slides or supporting materials, and we will be posting this on the recording on our YouTube channel. So we'll send a link to all of those registered or that attended today. Feel free to share this information with anyone you think might be interested. And you can always also reach out to us through email or phone. We'll include contact information as well.